As the medical industry strives to cure humans of diseases, an ambitious doctor named Isabel Ruben leads a hand-picked team to slow down aging. With the promise of the newest medical treatment and a state-of-the-art facility, rich people swarm to be younger. However, Mia, the wife of the company's owner, soon discovers a hidden truth behind the mystical cure. Mia, a promising equestrian, treasures Carrot, her horse. On the best days, they become one, body and mind. However, she also questions herself if she takes its freedom. That evening, the equestrian enters the room in her birthday suit to initiate intimacy with her husband, Thomas. Unfortunately, he refuses to interact with her. Mia proceeds downstairs and opens the mail from Dr. Isabel Ruben, Thomas's business partner. She sees a close-up picture of 14K burned on what seems like human skin. The following day, Thomas watches a video interview of Isabel regarding Resurrecta, a medical treatment for restoring youth and the state-of-the-art facility they're preparing to build. The ambitious doctor explains that for now, their clients are primarily male due to their unique biological characteristics. But in the future, it can be used by women, including herself, who have a complex biological composition. The interviewer asks taunting questions regarding the treatment's effectiveness and its ground to morality. However, the doctor turns the tide by emphasizing that aging is a sickness that needs a cure. Afterward, Thomas calls Isabel to speak with her about the matter. During her morning jog, Mia bumps into Nika, a neighbor's nanny, and the baby under her care. Just in time, Isabel greets the women, commenting on the beautiful baby and the nanny's gorgeous hair. The doctor touches Nika's hair, entangling it in her ring. As Isabel tries to free her hand, she discreetly pulls the nanny's hair strands and places them in her pocket. Mia guides the doctor to their house, conversing about the equestrian's perfect body condition, which is fitting for conception, but Thomas interrupts them by opening the door. The businessman declares to Isabel that this project is supposed to be a secret until they have enough funds to support the facilities. Isabel explains that their aim should be to pioneer this medical treatment, but Thomas argues that the progress isn't over phase 1 and is still experimental. To convince him, she shows pictures of a male client, Peter, from a year ago, who looks decades younger in his current photo. This result surprises Thomas, so Isabel stands her ground, saying that rich people don't care about policies and approval. If that happens, funds won't be an issue for the business. Despite this, Thomas insists that he's the factory's owner, so he firmly reprimands the doctor not to do anything without his approval, and she accepts his demands. Before leaving, Isabel approaches Mia to tell her she's lovely. Mia sarcastically responds that it'd be better for the doctor to share that information with Thomas, because he'll surely listen to her. The older lady advises her on how to get her husband's attention, so that night, the equestrian dolls herself up, which captivates her husband, which makes things go according to plan. The intimacy escalates fast, but suddenly, he turns away from Mia, leaving the woman upset. The man insists that he can't give his wife what she wants due to his infertility, which worsens Mia's agitation, so she walks out. Meanwhile, Nika's on her way home when a man suddenly bumps into her. She resumes walking, but after a few steps, she falls to the ground, paralyzed. Seconds later, a small truck stops beside her and drags the woman inside. She tries to stay awake and overhears two men saying that the medicine they used on her is an anesthetic for cows. Then, the nanny turns unconscious as the man gets a rod and heats its tip. Meanwhile, Mia returns to the room, and the couple makes up by hugging each other. On the other hand, Nika awakens and hears the strangers bicker about the unexpected roadblock, so she takes this chance to push the door open and roll out of the vehicle. She hides behind the bushes as the truck leaves. The next day, Isabel meets with a new client, Johansson, who wishes to look younger. Isabel tells the man to sign the non-disclosure agreement to discuss the new procedure. Afterward, the doctor presents their client's portfolios to display the treatment's credibility. Then she writes the amount that the man has to pay in crypto. They immediately begin the preparation, such as collecting male seed, a mouth swab, and blood extraction. The patient prods more about the treatment, but the doctor ignores him. With this, the man expresses his discomfort about being kept in the dark, so Isabel ushers him out. On the other hand, Thomas prepares his breakfast smoothie. Mia questions the quality of supplements they produce in their factory, noting that the labeling is wrong since her husband is a veterinarian, not a medical doctor. He makes a point by asking Mia to guess Isabel's age. She says the doctor is around 40, but Thomas says she's 61, shocking his wife. Suddenly, someone bangs on their door and Mia opens it for Nika, who's disheveled and bloody. Thomas immediately sees her shoulder with D17 burned on it, making him preoccupied. His wife tells him to fetch a towel, but he calls someone over the phone instead. Mia needs to shout at him again for him to bring the towel. The equestrian comforts the woman, but Thomas insists on taking her to the hospital, so Mia convinces the nanny to go with him. As the sun sets, the equestrian becomes more worried, so she sends a voice message to her husband telling him to return soon. However, that evening, Thomas still hasn't returned, so she calls the nearest hospitals, but none has admitted a lady named Nika. Meanwhile, Thomas's car finally stops outside of a seemingly abandoned facility. The door suddenly opens, and the man who took Nika yesterday drags her into the building. The businessman gets surprised upon seeing the woman being hauled, but he doesn't do anything to help her. Due to Mia's anxiety, she opens Thomas's computer to track his phone location. Just in time, a message from her husband arrives, notifying her that Nick is hospitalized. Realizing the discrepancy between her husband's location and the message, she grabs her car keys. On the other hand, Thomas enters the facility to find Isabel. Here, he confronts her about the man who dragged Nika. The doctor informs him that he's a caretaker she hired. He's called Dog, while his assistant is called Pig. The owner clarifies that he thought the woman volunteered, and Isabel states it isn't possible, but it's not an issue because this is only temporary. Thomas weakly expresses sympathy toward the women. Instead of responding, the doctor shows a picture of a woman named Ellie on her computer. Upon seeing her, Thomas conveys his guilt, so Isabel caresses his shoulders and affectionately whispers that she'll help him get through this. The man abruptly stands and walks out of the room as the doctor yells at him not to obstruct the project. When Thomas leaves the facility, Mia arrives. The woman enters a dilapidated building, and as she walks around, the floor suddenly collapses. She saves herself and resumes investigating the place. Mia finds the supplements her husband's company sells. Soon after, she hears a crying woman and follows the sound. She sees a woman tied on a table and Dog mercilessly electrocutes her. Suddenly, Pig comes from behind Mia, but she fights the older man and runs away. Unfortunately, she trips and falls. The older man grins at her, but when she turns around, Dog knocks her out. Mia regains consciousness and finds herself being dragged by Dog into a sealed room. After a while, Thomas arrives home and discovers that Mia found where he was. He calls Isabel and she confirms Mia's there. With this, he heads back to the facility. Meanwhile, Dog commands Mia to change clothes in front of him. She courageously refuses but soon finds out the caretaker means business, so the woman complies out of fear. After changing, she sees the door open, so she tries to escape. Dog catches her, ties her arms, puts duct tape on her mouth, and extracts her blood. The man heats a metal rod and burns Mia's shoulders, branding her with a 34A. He then showers the wound with his urine, and the woman screams in pain. On the other hand, Thomas finally arrives at the facility looking for Mia. He crosses paths with the caretaker and informs him Mia isn't like the others. The man replies that the test will determine that. Then he receives a call from Isabel, ordering him to allow Thomas to see Mia for 5 minutes. When the couple meets, Mia expresses anger towards her husband but breaks down soon after. Instead of rescuing his wife, Thomas warns Mia not to escape on her own since they could get killed, but he promises to get her out soon. With this, he leaves his wife as she sobs in despair. The doctor calmly calls Thomas across the hallway and warns him not to interfere, or Mia could get hurt. She confiscates the man's phone and commands him not to leave the premises. Meanwhile, Mia scans the room for anything useful. Then, the alarm rings as Nika runs around the facility, trying to escape. She ends up in front of the equestrian's room, asking for help. Pig appears behind Nika and smashes her head with a metal bar. The two caretakers casually clean up the mess, leaving Mia in shock. At the same time, Isabel meets with Johansson again. This time, the older man is very excited to get treatment since he personally sees another man who looks 20 years younger due to the treatment. With this, Isabel raises the price by 50% and the rich man grabs the opportunity. Afterward, the doctor resumes her research with one of the women as Dog assists her. She warns the caretaker not to touch the subjects with his manly desires, especially Mia, since she's essential. Concurrently, Thomas sneaks to Mia's door and finally unlocks the room after numerous attempts. The couple reunites, but Mia remembers the picture of 14K, so she asks her husband who she is. Thomas confesses that the girl's name is Ellie, whom he met 6 months ago at a party he and Isabel attended. The doctor introduced the lady, saying she's his type. Thomas mentions that everything was blurry, but he remembers Ellie wanting to be tied up. Then the next thing he knew was that her lifeless body was on the bed as he looked out the window. The doctor was the one who confirmed she's gone. Realization hits Mia that she's never getting out due to Isabel and Thomas's secret. Afterward, her husband returns to his room, leaving Mia alone. A few moments later, Isabel calls Thomas and shows him the new addition to their facility, the bio bag. Here, she's able to grow embryos by buying ovaries overseas. However, she admits that there are still some problems that are soon to be solved by adding the client's DNA. Thomas humorlessly jokes that the doctor can live for 180 years, but she responds that she's having difficulties finding her match. Isabel cunningly convinces her business partner that they can achieve their goals, especially the money. Soon after, Thomas drags Mia to where Isabel, Dog, and Pig are. He declares that she knows too much and must be taken care of. Mia sobs in anguish as her husband succumbs to Isabel's demands. After a short argument on who'll dispose of the woman, Thomas prevails as he wants to end this himself. He grabs a knife and drags Mia out. Thomas cuts Mia loose in the hallway to escape, but the caretakers see them. The chase begins happens, and the husband attempts to block the pursuers as Pig beats him unconscious while Dog looks for Mia. On the other hand, the equestrian finds a car, but it fails to start. In the end, Dog captures her again. Meanwhile, Pig enters Isabel's office, informing her that she finally has a DNA match, which is Mia. Dog prepares to eliminate Mia when Pig arrives to retrieve her for the procedure. She's knocked out again and regains consciousness, tied to an operating table. The doctor calmly examines her ovaries to look for a healthy egg. As Mia sobs silently, she begins to implant a client seed into it. Afterward, the doctor smiles in satisfaction, and Dog brings her to her new cell, where she sees other women. Some of them are pregnant, including Ellie, who's alive. Here, Mia meets Julie, who's pregnant. The woman asks her questions about the possibility of escape. Helena, the other woman in the adjacent cell who's crying in pain, warns them to stay quiet. Ellie speaks to Mia, and the equestrian tells her that her husband thought she was dead. The pregnant woman responds that she's tricked by Isabel, saying she'll be released if she follows the plan. Dog hears the commotion and finds Helena whimpering in pain. She explains that her tooth aches, and the heartless man pulls it with pliers. When the woman can't stop sobbing, he staples her mouth to shut her up. Ellie can't bear the scene, so she insults Dog. The man goes to her cell and beats her up despite being pregnant, and her water immediately breaks. Dog panics and runs to call Isabel. Fortunately, the baby is born well, but Ellie doesn't even get the chance to touch her child as the doctor leaves with the infant. After a few hours, the caretaker arrives with some supplies, so Mia purposely urinates on the floor, making him angry. He enters the cell and Mia takes the chance to fight him. Despite being overpowered, Mia grabs the man's knife from his pocket and stabs him. Unfortunately, the man strangles her, and on the verge of losing her breath, Julie grabs the knife on Dog's side and stabs him on his back. The woman yells at Mia to get the keys, and she successfully frees the ladies. Julie, Ellie, Mia, and the quiet woman all go out to find the baby. They locate a room with a foul smell, but Mia throws up in disgust when she opens it. They hear a baby's cry and rush to the sound. Meanwhile, Helena calmly approaches the bleeding Dog on the floor. She cradles him and coaxes him on how strong he is. Simultaneously, Thomas regains consciousness and looks for some weapons and keys. He searches for Mia and unlocks one of the cells, finding 2 other women. He gives them the key and tells them to free the others. In the laboratory, Isabel, assisted by Pig, cuts the baby's back slowly as the infant cries in pain. Ellie and the others arrive just before the doctor dissects the baby. However, they stop their attack as Isabel threatens to stab the infant. The doctor takes the chance to escape as Pig blocks the ladies. However, the 4 women fight him furiously. He still overpowers them, so Mia grabs the chain on the wall and wraps it around Pig's neck. Then she tells the women to pull both ends, and the man finally succumbs to his end. Ellie finds her baby left on the counter and hugs him tightly, comforting the child. Mia immediately searches for Isabel, but Dog arrives, trudging while searching for her, so she hides in the locker. However, the deranged man notices her hiding place. Suddenly, Thomas calls out to her. Dog closes the locker and hides while the husband looks for his wife. The caretaker strangles Thomas using a barbed wire, and the 2 men fight for their life. Thomas is losing badly, but Mia escapes the locker and grabs the electric taser that Thomas drops. She electrocutes Dog, knocking him out. Meanwhile, Isabel heads to her lab to take her DNA samples before escaping. As she hurries out of the facility, she crosses paths with the freed women who fiercely attack her, shattering her precious test tubes. After a while, Dog awakens tied to a metal compartment while Isabel is restrained to a pole. The caretaker keeps his pride by shouting at the women surrounding him. Mia's comrade, the quiet woman, suddenly stands on top of him and urinates on him, just like he did to all of them after branding them. The women laugh mockingly, and some of the ladies approach to beat him with a metal pole. As the women yell in satisfaction, Helena unties Isabel, telling her to help Dog. The doctor grabs the screwdriver near her, but her victims soon surround her. She knows she won't be able to escape, so she stabs her heart instead and collapses on the floor. Everyone turns silent. Some cry and sigh in relief now that their nightmare ends. Soon after, the police and rescuers arrive. Afterward, Mia mentions that the events were covered up since there's no record of any client's name, and only photos of very influential men were retrieved. No one tries to uncover the truth, and she also testifies that her husband is innocent. Mia and Thomas regain their peaceful life, and their love for each other deepens after overcoming the challenges. Aside from that, Thomas proves himself as a renewed person when he accepts Nika, Mia's baby.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.